A former Navy SEAL had been trained to read footprints in dry dirt, hear movement in the dark, and stay calm in moments most people would spend a lifetime trying to forget. But he could not understand a little German Shepherd puppy, barely more than 2 months old. The puppy was not aggressive, not frantic, and it clearly heard the world around it. Yet every time someone bent down and called the temporary name written in its shelter file, those dark brown eyes looked right through them, as if the sound belonged to another life. He had faced danger without letting his hands shake, but this small silence unsettled him in a way no battlefield ever had. Until he realized the puppy had never been ignoring them at all. It was waiting for a sound no one there knew. Before we begin, tell us what city you're watching from today. We'd love to know how far this story travels. Spring came to Maple Junction, Missouri in no hurry, laying a cool morning breeze over the small roads, leaving the smell of young grass around the parking lot of Oak Bend Animal Rescue and a few yellow streaks of dust on the windows after a dry afternoon. Miles Avery usually arrived before 8, parked his old pickup at the far corner of the lot, and sat for a few seconds while he checked the front door, the side exit, and the soft movement of people behind the cloudy glass. Nearly 10 years in the Navy SEALs had taught him how to stay calm, read a room, and enter any place with his eyes open. Though nothing in the military had taught him how to understand an animal that carried sadness quietly. Miles had not started at Oak Bend because he loved dogs or believed he had some hidden gift for caring for them. After he left the service, a veterans counselor in town suggested he find steady volunteer work, something useful, low noise, and ordinary enough that nobody would ask too many questions about the life he was trying to fold away. Oak Bend needed someone to repair fences, replace door latches, haul food bags, clear storage shelves, and handle the heavier work many of the older volunteers could no longer do easily, so Miles accepted because the tasks were clear, quiet, and had a beginning and an end. That was supposed to be the whole arrangement. During his first week, he was crouched beside a stuck kennel door with a wrench in one hand and a screw held between his lips when a small mixed-breed dog from the recovery area slipped up behind him. The dog took the end of his bootlace in its teeth, gave it one solemn tug, and sat down as if it had discovered an urgent assignment. Miles turned his head slowly. The dog stared back with perfect confidence, and Dana Whitlock, the shelter manager, laughed from the hallway. "If you plan to stay around here," Dana told him, "you'll need to learn the difference between a command and an invitation to play." Miles looked down at the dog, then at his half-untied boot, then back at the door he still had not fixed. He did not understand dogs any better after that morning. Yet something about Oak Bend became less like a place where he was merely volunteering and more like a place that expected him to soften his grip on the day. The shelter did not run on military discipline. It ran on patience, feeding schedules, clean towels, careful voices, and small lives that had no interest in who he had once been. A few weeks later, the German Shepherd puppy arrived. It had been found near Maple Junction self-storage, behind the donation drop-off area and the truck rental office, in the kind of ordinary place where people left cardboard boxes, folded blankets, and the last loose pieces of a move. There was no great alarm around its arrival, no crowd at the front desk, no dramatic story that made the staff lower their voices. The puppy came in with a little dirt on its paws, a wary attention to the sound of wheels rolling over concrete, and a silence that felt too old for something barely more than 2 months alive. Dana handled the intake the way she handled every new animal, with paperwork, a careful check, and a gentleness that never slowed the work. The shelter gave the puppy a temporary name because every animal needed one for the file, for the food chart, for the notes taped outside the kennel. Staff members used that name when they brought meals, when they cleaned the run, when they bent down with soft voices and hopeful hands. The puppy did not take it. At first, Miles thought the little shepherd was only overwhelmed. Oak Bend had its own weather inside the building. Bulls clinking, dogs barking in uneven bursts, dryers thumping in the laundry room, the rubber soles of volunteers moving up and down the hall. A young animal could shut down in all that noise, and Miles knew enough about stress to avoid judging too quickly. Still, the details did not line up. The puppy heard the world around it. Its head turned when the back door opened, its eyes followed people through the hallway, and its ears shifted when a key ring hit the counter. Yet when someone spoke the temporary name from the shelter file, the puppy looked past the voice with those dark brown eyes, as though the sound had been meant for another creature in another room. Miles noticed that before he wanted to. The first family came on a Saturday morning, when sunlight sat pale on the lobby floor and the bulletin board near the desk was crowded with adoption flyers, vaccination reminders, and a faded notice about a spring bake sale at the Methodist church. A little girl knelt outside the kennel and smiled at the shepherd's soft ears and oversized paws. Her father read the note card, her mother asked reasonable questions, and all three waited for the puppy to give them something back. It only watched. They stayed longer than most people would have. The girl whispered to it. The father tried the name from the file, and the mother pressed 2 fingers against the kennel gate with careful kindness. After a few minutes, Dana came over and explained that some animals needed more time, especially after being found during a confusing move or near a busy storage lot. The family nodded with sympathy, then chose another puppy that bounced toward the gate the moment they approached. Miles understood their decision. He even respected it. People came to shelters hoping for a sign, a wagging tail, a paw against the door, some small proof that love could begin easily. When the sign did not come, most of them moved on with a quiet apology in their faces. By the end of the week, it happened again. An older couple stopped by after lunch, drawn to the shepherd because the husband had grown up with one on a farm outside Sedalia. He stood with both hands resting on his cane and told the puppy it was a handsome little thing. His wife smiled when one of the puppy's ears folded sideways from sleepiness. But when the temporary name brought no response, her expression softened into the sad practicality of someone who had already raised enough living things to know what she could handle. They left with a smaller dog that leaned into her ankle. Miles watched them go through the glass doors, the new leash bright in the husband's hand. He stood beside the kennel with a rolled lead in his fist, feeling a tightness in his chest that seemed too large for such a small disappointment. Nobody had done anything cruel. Nobody had spoken harshly or turned away with indifference. That made it harder. The puppy sat near the back of the kennel, paws tucked close, eyes steady on the hallway. It did not beg. It did not cower. It seemed to understand that people came, tried a sound, waited for a sign, and left when the sign never appeared. Miles crouched outside the gate and rested one forearm on his knee. He did not reach through the bars. He had learned that much from Donna, from the bootlace thief in recovery, and from the way this puppy's body went still whenever someone wanted too much too soon. The shepherd looked at him for a long moment. Miles gave the temporary name once quietly, because it was written on the file and because everyone else had tried it. The puppy's gaze stayed calm and distant, floating just beyond him. Somewhere down the hall, a dryer buzzed, a volunteer laughed under her breath, and a spring wind pushed dust softly against the front windows. Miles did not know what was missing. He only knew the puppy was hearing the world. It had not yet heard the thing that belonged to it. Before we discover what the little German Shepherd puppy was still waiting to hear, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Mrs. June Bellamy came to Oak Bend on a mild afternoon, carrying an old cloth basket, a tin of needles, and several spools of thread sorted by color with the care other people reserved for family photographs. She lived 2 houses down from Miles on Sycamore Street, in a white one-story home with a porch swing, red geraniums, and a sewing room that glowed long after most windows on the block had gone dark. For more than 30 years, June had restored old quilts, embroidered handkerchiefs, baptism gowns, wedding dresses, and the soft pieces of family history that people brought to her when they were afraid time had taken too much. Once a month, she came to the shelter to mend what could still be used: a torn blanket from the recovery room, a frayed kennel pad, a stack of clean fabric squares that could become something warmer than a bare floor. She never made a ceremony out of it, yet every time she left, the place seemed to have one more small kindness folded into it. Miles knew her in the careful way quiet neighbors knew each other. He had helped her carry a heavy sewing machine into her garage the previous fall, and she had left a box of lemon cookies on his porch on Memorial Day without asking whether he wanted company. Between them lived a simple understanding. Some doors should be knocked on, and some evenings only needed a porch light left burning. That afternoon, Miles saw June sign in at the front desk and looked toward the German Shepherd puppy before he realized he was doing it. The little shepherd had spent most of the morning near the back of the kennel, watching the hallway with that same distant calm that made people lower their voices. Two more visitors had stopped by after lunch, and both had moved on when the puppy gave them nothing they knew how to read. Miles waited until June set her basket on the counter. "There's one up front," he said. "Young shepherd. Quiet." June looked at him over the rim of her glasses. Quiet because he's tired, or quiet because people keep asking him to be something? Miles gave a small breath that was almost a laugh. "That's why I thought of you." He led her down the front row of kennels, past a beagle sleeping with one paw through the gate and a gray-muzzled hound thumping his tail against a folded towel. The afternoon light came through the high windows in pale strips, landing across the concrete floor and the lower bars of the kennel doors. Somewhere behind them, Dana Whitlock was answering the phone, her voice steady in the practical music of shelter life. The German Shepherd puppy lifted its head when June stopped outside the kennel. June did not bend over the gate or reach through the bars. She placed her basket beside the wall, eased herself onto the low wooden stool Miles brought from the laundry room, and opened a small blanket already pinned at one corner. Her hands moved without hurry, drawing the thread through the cloth in small, even stitches, the needle flashing once whenever it caught the light. The puppy watched her from the back. Miles stood a few steps away, one shoulder near the wall, saying nothing. He had seen volunteers try treats, toys, whistles, bright voices, and patient smiles. He had seen kind people make themselves smaller, softer, sweeter, and still the puppy remained behind that invisible line inside the kennel. June offered no performance at all. She hummed under her breath, so low it hardly became a tune. The sound blended with the laundry room dryer, the soft click of Dana's keyboard, and the shifting feet of dogs settling for the afternoon. After several minutes, the puppy rose, stretched with the awkward seriousness of a young animal still growing into its own bones, and took one careful step forward. Miles felt his hand tighten around the lead he was carrying. June kept sewing. The puppy came to the center of the kennel, then paused. Its dark eyes moved from June's face to the blanket in her lap, then to her hands. When she drew the thread through the cloth again, the puppy leaned forward, as if that slow, ordinary motion had asked less of it than any voice had all week. Some silences invite trust without touching it. The puppy stepped closer to the gate and lowered its head toward the edge of the blanket where it had slipped near the bars. June let the fabric rest there and did not move her fingers toward the small nose sniffing at the seam. The shepherd breathed in the scent of cotton, old thread, laundry soap, and the faint lavender sachet June kept in her sewing basket. Then sunlight shifted across the kennel. It landed on the worn leather collar sitting low under the puppy's soft neck fur, and something small on the metal tag caught June's eye. She stopped with the needle held above the cloth. Her face changed only slightly, but Miles saw it, the way he saw a door left open by half an inch. "Miles," she said quietly, "would you ask Dana to come here?" He was already moving before the question finished. Dana arrived with the intake folder tucked under one arm, her expression alert but calm. She checked the notes, confirmed the collar had been logged with the puppy's belongings, and unlocked the kennel with the slow movement she used around animals that needed room to decide. The puppy backed up once, then stayed where it was when June folded her hands in her lap and looked away from the gate. Miles crouched near the door, waiting for Dana's nod before he reached in. He touched the collar with 2 fingers first, then lifted the small tag enough for the light to reach it. The metal was scratched, dulled by dirt and wear, and the engraving looked less like letters than broken lines left behind by something almost gone. June opened her sewing tin, took out a little magnifying glass with a brass handle, and passed it to Dana. Dana studied the tag, then handed it to June. For a moment, the three of them stayed in that narrow pocket of afternoon light, gathered around a few marks on a piece of metal while dogs barked in other rooms, and the shelter kept breathing around them. The puppy watched from inches away, still enough that even Miles lowered his own breathing without meaning to. June used the corner of a clean cloth to wipe the tag once, Then again, with the tenderness of someone cleaning dust from a wedding veil. The first letter came clear. R. Miles leaned closer. June tilted the tag beneath the window light, her thumb steady against the worn leather. A second letter appeared, then a third, each one rising out of scratches and old grime, as if the name had been waiting for the right pair of hands. Dana's face softened when the final letters came together. Riley June did not say it right away. She looked at the puppy, then at the tag, then back again, as if she understood that some names should be returned with care. When she finally spoke, her voice barely rose above the thread sliding through the blanket in her lap. Riley. The puppy's head lifted at once. Its ears, still too soft to stand with full confidence, twitched forward. The distant look in its eyes broke open into recognition so sudden that Miles felt the change before he understood it. The puppy took one step toward June, then another, and stood at the gate with its nose almost touching the place where her hand rested on the folded blanket. Dana covered her mouth with the edge of the folder. Miles stayed crouched beside the open kennel, unable to move for several seconds. He had spent the week watching people call toward that small body and receive only silence in return. Now one quiet word had crossed the space between them and found the place every other sound had missed. June read the name again, softer this time. Riley. The puppy held her gaze. From that moment, the animal in the front kennel was no longer only a quiet German Shepherd puppy with a temporary name on a shelter file. The old collar had given back what the file could not know, and the silence around the kennel changed shape. It was Riley. The name Riley changed the air around the front kennel, though it did not change the work waiting around it. Dogs still needed feeding, towels still came out of the dryer in warm piles, and Dana still moved from room to room with a clipboard tucked against her ribs. Yet every time someone passed Riley's gate now, Miles felt the difference. A name had returned, a home had not. By the next morning, Miles had joined more local groups online than he had entered in the past 5 years. Lost pets in Maple Junction. Found animals in Jasper County. Community notices for the north side of town, the south side, the county road neighborhoods, the veterinary clinic bulletin page, the self-storage office page, and one group whose main purpose seemed to be arguing about potholes near the feed store. He sat at the small desk in Oak Bend's break room with a paper cup of coffee going cold beside his elbow, scrolling through posts while the spring wind pushed dust along the window screen. There were too many German Shepherd puppies, too many blurry phone pictures taken in driveways, kitchens, back seats, and fenced yards. Too many comments from people trying to help with the honest confusion of strangers, sending links, tagging neighbors, asking whether the puppy had been seen near one road or another. Every few posts, Miles would stop. A dark muzzle, a folded ear, a black saddle across the back that looked almost right. Then he would look closer at the chest, the tail, the shape of the eyes, or the way the puppy stood, and the certainty would fall apart in his hands. It was not Riley. The work pulled at him between searches. He fixed a latch on the side gate, carried 2 bags of food into the pantry, and helped Dana move a stack of clean kennel pads from the laundry room to the front hall. He answered when someone asked for help, nodded when spoken to, and kept returning to the screen whenever a few minutes opened. June came by at noon to drop off another folded blanket, one patched with squares of faded blue and cream. She found him leaning over his phone near the front desk, his brows drawn tight enough to make him look older than 34. She did not ask whether he had slept well. "You're hunting," she said. Miles looked up, searching. For some men, that's the same thing. He gave her the smallest smile, then turned the phone so she could see the latest photo. A German Shepherd puppy sat in a laundry basket beside a boy in a baseball cap. Similar ears, similar paws, wrong white patch on the chest. June studied it for a moment, shook her head, and rested the folded blanket on the counter. "The right thing may be buried under a lot of almost," she said. By late afternoon, his eyes burned from the screen. The post appeared on a neighborhood page that had not come up in his first searches because the original wording never said German Shepherd. It said puppy, missing near Maple Junction self-storage, and the date sat a little over 2 weeks back. Photograph was poor, tilted and grainy, with sunlight cutting across the frame in the wrong direction, but the puppy in it sat by a car window with its head turned halfway toward whoever had taken the picture. Miles went still. Behind the puppy were cardboard boxes, bungee cords, a plastic laundry bin, and a child's jacket thrown over the seat. The caption was short, strained, and full of the kind of details people wrote when they were trying to keep panic from spilling through the words. Moving day. Door opened for a second. Puppy slipped out near the storage office. Please call if seen. The name was missing from the post. Miles read it twice, then a third time, and almost moved on because the photo gave him enough hope to be dangerous and not enough proof to be useful. Then he opened the comments. Most were old suggestions, small prayers, and neighborhood guesses that led nowhere. Someone thought they saw a similar dog near the tire shop. Someone else tagged a cousin who worked at the animal clinic. A woman asked whether the owner had checked the ditch behind the rental trucks, and another replied that she had walked there that evening with a flashlight. Near the bottom, one line waited under the weight of all the others. I hope Riley makes it home. Miles read the sentence once, then again with his thumb resting beside the screen. The noise of the shelter seemed to pull back from him, leaving only the small hum of the lights and the pressure in his chest. June's voice came back to him, calm and certain beside the kennel. Riley. He took a screenshot, copied the number from the post, and stepped outside so the hallway noise would not cover the call. The parking lot was half bright, half shaded, the kind of Missouri evening that made every truck windshield flash gold for a second before the sun dropped behind the grain elevator. Miles pressed the number and listened. It rang. He let it ring too long. When the call ended, he stood with the phone still against his ear, looking at the dust gathered along the bottom of the shelter sign. After a minute, he called again. The second call led him to the same silence, so he sent a careful message to the account that had posted the photo, attaching only what was necessary: the shelter name, the date Riley had arrived, and a request to confirm identifying details. Then he checked his phone too often. Dana noticed before he thought to hide it. She came into the break room while he was refreshing the message thread, carrying a file folder and the kind of expression that meant she had already weighed kindness against policy and found no clean answer between them. She sat across from him without speaking at first. Miles, she said, I know what you found matters. He put the phone face down. Dana opened the file. The microchip scan came back empty. The collar has no current license tag. We don't have a confirmed owner, and a comment under an old post isn't enough for us to hold placement decisions. Miles looked toward the front hall, where Riley's kennel sat just out of view. I'm waiting for a call. I know. Dana's voice stayed gentle, and if they answer, we'll handle it properly. But Riley is getting stressed up front. Too many visitors, too many voices. The quiet room in back may be better for him. Miles understood before she said the rest. The room in back had softer noise, steadier light, and fewer people stopping at the gate every hour. It was a kinder place for an overwhelmed puppy, and in shelter work, kindness often had to be practical before it could be beautiful. It also meant fewer visitors would see him, fewer chances. Dana did not look pleased with the choice. I can give it until tomorrow afternoon. Miles nodded, because arguing with truth had never been one of his talents. The shelter did not have endless space, endless time, or endless staff to arrange the world around one animal with a worn collar and a name that had only just come back. Riley mattered, but so did every other living thing behind every other door. That was the hard part. That evening, after the front lights dimmed and the last visitor signed out, Miles carried Riley's dinner to the kennel. He set the food down outside the gate, then paused with his hand on the lid. Riley lay on the blanket June had mended, his chin resting between his paws, the old collar sealed in a small evidence bag clipped to the outside of the file. The puppy watched every move. Miles opened the container slowly, letting the familiar smell drift through the bars before he slid the bowl in. Riley rose and came forward, cautious but steady, then stopped when Miles whispered his name, the old name, the true one. Riley. The puppy looked up. For one quiet second, the whole day seemed to hold its breath. The unanswered calls, the buried comment, Dana's deadline, the room in back, all of it narrowed to the small face on the other side of the gate. Miles had seen what happened when people failed to find what they were searching for in time. He did not want that for Riley. If Hannah did not answer soon, the puppy might disappear from the sight of the people who could choose him. Again, Near closing time, Miles's phone buzzed while the shelter had settled into its evening hush. The front lights were dimmed, the hallway smelled faintly of detergent from the last load of blankets, and the distant barks from the back rooms came softened by closed doors. Riley had finished half his dinner and gone back to the patched blanket June had left for him, chin low, eyes open. Miles looked at the screen. The number was from the old post. He stepped into the small office near the lobby and answered with his name, the shelter's name, and nothing more. For a few seconds, the woman on the other end only breathed, as if she had reached the edge of a room she had been afraid to enter. When she finally spoke, she did not claim Riley, did not break down, did not reach through the phone with certainty she had not earned yet. She began with questions. "Is the tip of his tail darker than the rest?" she asked. "Does one ear fold when he's tired? Is there a dark mark between his eyes, almost like somebody pressed a thumb there?" Miles picked up a pen, though he did not need it. His eyes moved toward the hallway, where Riley's kennel sat beyond the office wall, and he answered each detail in the same careful order she gave it. Yes, the tail had a darker tip. Yes, one ear fell softer when Riley was sleepy. Yes, there was a narrow mark between the eyes. The woman swallowed hard. "Does he get nervous around rolling suitcases?" she asked. "Or anything with wheels on tile?" Miles closed his eyes for half a second. "Yes." Her voice thinned, then steadied again. She asked how Riley reacted to men he did not know, whether he backed away quickly or stood still first to study them. She asked if he watched before moving, if he kept his paws close when he sat, if he sometimes leaned toward a person and then changed his mind. Miles recognized the shape of her caution before she finished. She was afraid to be wrong. Worse, she was afraid to be right. He told her what he could, slowly, without softening facts into comfort. He explained when Riley had arrived, where he had been found, what the collar looked like, and how they had read the name from the worn tag. On the other end, the woman made one small sound when he said Riley's name, then went quiet long enough for Miles to hear the faint hum of the office light above him. "My name is Hannah Whitmore," she said at last. The next morning, Hannah came to Oak Bend in a gray sweater, jeans, and shoes that looked as though she had left home before deciding whether she was ready. Her hair was tied back in a loose knot, and one strand kept falling near her cheek because her hands were too full to fix it. She carried a thin manila envelope against her chest, its corners bent from being handled too many times. The sky outside had gone pale with cloud cover, turning the parking lot soft and flat. No rain fell, yet the air held that damp Missouri stillness that made every sound seem closer. Tires rolling over gravel, the front door chime, Dana's voice greeting someone at the desk. Miles met Hannah near the lobby, and she looked past him almost at once. On the counter lay Riley's old collar inside a clear evidence sleeve. Hannah stopped, her shoulders lowered by a fraction, a movement so small Miles might have missed it, before Oak Bend taught him to watch quieter things. She did not reach for the collar until Dana gave permission, and even then she touched the sleeve with only 2 fingers. The tag caught the morning light and showed the name, scratched but readable, Riley. Hannah pressed her lips together. Inside the envelope were old flyers, a printed copy of the missing post, 2 photos of Riley in a car seat beside a child's jacket, and a vet receipt from a clinic in Joplin. Dana checked each piece without rushing. Miles stood nearby, hands loose at his sides, while Hannah explained the parts no document could prove. The divorce had come before spring. Her son, Noah, was staying mostly with his father for now because his school was near the old house, and Hannah did not want to break one more thing in the boy's life. Her new apartment on the south side of town had a strict no-pet clause, printed cleanly in a lease that did not care how a child slept better with a puppy breathing at the foot of the bed. She had planned to find another arrangement once the move was done. Then moving day swallowed the plan. At Maple Junction Self-Storage, boxes sat stacked by rooms that no longer existed together. Kitchen, Noah's books, winter coats. Hannah said the adults were trying to speak kindly because a child was watching, and every kind word seemed to cost something. A truck door opened. Someone called from the office. A cart bumped over the concrete, and Riley slipped out in the confusion before anyone understood what had changed. Hannah searched for days. She taped flyers to the feed store window, the laundromat board, the storage office, and the glass door of a gas station off County Road 12. She called veterinary clinics, left messages with shelters, walked behind the rental trucks, and returned to the storage lot until the woman at the front desk knew her by name. Then rent came due. Noah needed rides, work shifts changed, and the calls from the lawyer kept arriving at times that made her stand in grocery aisles with one hand over her eyes. One evening, she took the last wrinkled flyer out of her car because it had coffee stains on it and one corner had torn loose. She hated her hand for doing it. Dana arranged the meeting in the quiet room instead of the front kennel. June had come after Miles called her, bringing a folded handkerchief and saying nothing about how quickly she had put on her shoes. She stood near the doorway while Dana brought Riley in on a light lead, giving him enough space to choose the room for himself. Hannah knelt. She did not rush forward. She did not call him again and again. She put one hand flat on the floor, palm down, as if she knew her own wanting might be too large for him to carry all at once. "Riley," she said. The puppy stopped. His nose lifted first. Then his body shifted forward, one paw, then another, slow enough that every person in the room seemed to forget how to breathe. He came close to Hannah's sleeve, sniffed the wool, paused at her wrist, and leaned in just enough for his nose to touch her hand. Hannah closed her eyes. For one fragile second, hope entered the room too quickly. Riley stepped back. He did not run. He did not hide. He simply retreated until his shoulder brushed Miles's boot, then sat there with his eyes still on Hannah, as if he remembered her, and could not yet decide what remembering required of him. Hannah kept her hand on the floor, fingers trembling once before she curled them under. Miles looked away. There are moments when mercy means leaving someone unobserved. Hannah could prove Riley had belonged to her family, and Dana's file would show that much clearly. She could show pictures, answer details, and say his name in a way that reached something no temporary name had touched. What she could not show was a home that allowed him back, a schedule wide enough for a frightened puppy, or a way for Noah to have him every night without tearing open the custody arrangement already holding their lives together by threads. Miles could not pretend he was ready either. He still asked Dana how to read the vaccine schedule. He still wrote down feeding instructions like mission notes and felt foolish for doing it. He knew how to stay calm under pressure, but Riley was not a problem to solve quickly. He was a small life asking for steadiness. June stepped forward only after the silence had been given room. "Sometimes keeping a living thing safe," she said, "doesn't mean carrying it back to the place our hearts miss most. Sometimes love has to ask where it will be less afraid today." Hannah bowed her head. The tears came before she answered, quiet and immediate, falling onto the floor near the hand Riley had touched. Dana closed the folder with care. Miles stood beside the puppy, feeling the weight of a choice that did not belong neatly to any one person. That day, nobody called it giving up. Miles did not sign the adoption papers that afternoon. He drove home with Riley's file on the passenger seat, the old collar sealed in its sleeve, and Dana's instructions clipped neatly to the front. The sun had gone low over Maple Junction, turning the grain elevator beyond County Road 12 into a pale shape against the sky, and for once Miles did not turn on the radio. Hannah's tears had followed him out of the shelter more quietly than any sound could have. By the time he pulled into Sycamore Street, June's porch light was already on. Miles stood on her steps with the adoption folder, a printed vaccine schedule, a list of puppy supplies Dana had written for him, and the uneasy face of a man who had once stayed calm under danger, but now felt defeated by the phrase "slow feeder bowl." June opened the door, looked at the papers in his hands, and stepped aside as if the question had reached her before he did. Her sewing room glowed behind her, warm with lamplight, folded quilts, and the smell of starch and lemon tea. "You came to ask if you're ready," she said. Miles looked down at the folder. "I came to ask if Riley would be." June did not answer right away. She moved a stack of fabric from the kitchen chair and let him sit, then poured tea he did not ask for but wrapped both hands around anyway. Outside, a lawnmower hummed somewhere down the block, then fell silent, leaving the house filled with the small tick of June's wall clock. Miles told her the truth in pieces. He had never been a canine handler. He had worked near dog teams overseas only when a mission required it, and those dogs had arrived with trained handlers, clear commands, and a purpose everyone understood. Riley was different. Riley needed quiet after fear, space after recognition, and a kind of patience Miles could not organize into a checklist. June listened until his words ran out. Then she folded her hands on the table. "Do you want to rescue him, Miles, or are you willing to live slower with him?" The question stayed in the room after her voice was gone. The next morning, Miles returned to Oak Bend with better questions. He asked Dana about feeding amounts, sleep routines, vaccination timing, safe socialization, and how to handle visits with Hannah and Noah without asking too much from Riley too soon. Dana answered each one, then watched him write notes in a small black notebook, with the seriousness of a man preparing for weather he could not control. When the paperwork was finished, she did not congratulate him loudly. She only handed him the leash. Riley came home on a bright morning with dew, still, on the grass and robins pulling worms from the strip of lawn beside the driveway. Miles carried him from the truck only for the first few steps, then set him down near the porch because June had told him a new house should be entered by choice whenever possible. Riley sniffed the first step, the corner of the doormat, and one loose leaf caught against the railing. Then he walked in. The house had always been tidy in a way that looked less like comfort than readiness. Boots lined up by the door, keys in the same dish, blinds angled so Miles could see the street without standing in the window. A folded blanket sat on the back of the couch, sharp at the corners, as if it had passed inspection. Riley changed the room before touching anything. Miles had prepared a resting corner near the kitchen, close enough to hear him moving, and far enough from the front door that passing trucks would not feel like visitors. June's patched blanket lay there, soft blue and cream, beside a water bowl, a chew toy, and the new leash coiled beside the old collar in a small wooden tray. He kept the collar safe, rather than making Riley wear it all day, because some memories needed honor before they could become ordinary. The first hours were small. Riley drank twice, ate a little, then slept with his nose tucked toward the wall. When a neighbor rolled a trash bin down the driveway, his body stiffened and his eyes went to the door. Miles started to stand, then stopped himself, sat back on the kitchen floor, and waited until Riley looked away on his own. That became the work. Miles learned to sit sideways instead of facing Riley straight on. He learned to place the bowl down and step back before hope made his hands too eager. He learned to say Riley's name once, then let the room answer in silence rather than filling every pause with proof that he cared. June came by 2 afternoons later with a tin of biscuits for Miles and a square of fabric she said might become another kennel blanket someday. She found him sitting on the floor beside the refrigerator, reading a puppy care pamphlet, while Riley slept 3 feet away. The sight made her smile, though she hid most of it by looking into her sewing basket. "You're breathing like he's a test," she said. Miles looked at Riley. "Feels like one. He's a puppy," June said. "He'll make mistakes, so will you. Try not to salute every problem when it walks into the room." That almost made him laugh. She showed him how to watch Riley's body before deciding what the puppy needed. The ears, the paws, the weight shifting backward, the little lick of the nose when a sound came too suddenly. She told him progress should stay quiet for a while, because turning every small step into a celebration could make a frightened animal feel surrounded. Miles wrote none of that down. He remembered it better that way. Over the next week, the house loosened by inches. A chew toy appeared under the coffee table. A towel stayed on the floor after Riley knocked over the water bowl, and Miles chose to leave it there until morning. The blanket on the couch lost its sharp corners because Riley dragged one side down and fell asleep against it while Miles stood in the hallway, pretending he had not seen. At night, the old habits still came for him. Miles woke at 2, then 3, listening for sounds that belonged to other years. His hand would reach for the edge of the bed, his eyes measuring shadows, his body awake before the room needed him. Then he would hear Riley breathing near the kitchen, uneven at first, then soft and steady on June's patched blanket. The sound gave the dark a different shape. One evening, Miles realized he had checked the back lock only once. Another night, he left his boots slightly crooked by the door because Riley had fallen asleep with one paw resting over the laces. It was such a small surrender that no one else would have noticed, but Miles stood there for a long moment, looking at the paw, the boot, the quiet hallway. He let it stay. Riley had not broken Miles's discipline. The puppy had entered the house like a question and made every answer slower. Safety, Miles began to understand, did not always come from control. Sometimes it came from staying. Hannah did not come the next day, though Miles knew the waiting cost her. Dana helped arrange the visits with the same care she used for medical charts and feeding notes, keeping them short, predictable, and far enough apart for Riley to settle between them. June agreed with the plan, then told Miles that a heart still learning safety should never be treated like a doorbell people could ring whenever grief became too loud. Hannah said yes to all of it. That yes told Miles more than any promise could have. She loved Riley enough to want him near, and enough to give him time when near was too much. The difference sat quietly in Miles's kitchen for 2 days while Riley learned the sound of the refrigerator, the rhythm of Miles's boots, and the small comfort of June's patched blanket under his paws. The first visit came on a Thursday afternoon. Hannah arrived alone, wearing the same gray sweater from Oak Bend, though this time her hair was brushed back and her hands held nothing. Miles met her at the side gate and led her around to the back porch, where the steps faced a small yard bordered by a chain-link fence and 2 lilac bushes just beginning to show purple at the tips. Spring light moved across the grass in thin, shifting bands. Hannah sat on the second step. She did not enter the house. She did not ask to hold him. Through the sliding glass door, Riley saw her and came forward slowly, his nose working at the air, his ears folding and lifting, as if the past had entered the room wearing familiar clothes. Miles stood nearby, one hand resting against the doorframe. Riley stepped onto the porch, sniffed once toward Hannah's shoes, then drifted back until his shoulder touched Miles's boot. This time his body did not tremble the way it had in the quiet room at Oak Bend. Hannah saw that, and the breath she released sounded almost like gratitude. "Riley," she said once. The name stayed gentle. Hannah kept her palm low, fingers loose, and let him decide what to do with the sound. Riley watched her for a while, then turned and went back inside to his blanket near the kitchen. Hannah lowered her hand to her lap, looked at the empty place where he had stood, and smiled through the hurt because he had come closer than before. "That's more than last time," Miles said. Hannah nodded. "I know." The second visit came 4 days later after school. A blue sedan pulled up in front of Miles's house, and a man stepped out first, tall, tired-looking, with a work badge clipped to his belt and the cautious politeness of someone who understood he was standing inside a delicate arrangement. He opened the back door for Noah, then spoke briefly with Hannah near the curb. The words were ordinary. What time? How long? Call me after. Yet the way they spoke made the divorce feel less like a battlefield and more like a broken bridge. 2 adults were still trying to cross for their child. Noah came through the gate carrying an old rope toy. He was smaller than Miles expected, with sandy hair, a red backpack, and the careful face of a boy trying hard to be brave in front of grown-ups. Hannah touched his shoulder before he stepped onto the porch, and he nodded as if he had memorized instructions on the ride over. "Do not run. Do not grab. Let Riley choose." The boy sat down on the porch boards. He placed the rope toy in front of him, then folded both hands into his lap. The effort in that stillness was almost painful to watch. Riley stood behind Miles at first, peering around his leg, eyes fixed on the toy before they moved to Noah's face. Noah whispered, "Hi, Riley." Riley did not come all the way. He walked to the edge of the porch shadow, stopped halfway across the boards, and lowered his nose as if the old toy carried too many rooms inside it. His tail moved once, barely, then went still. Nobody cheered, nobody clapped, nobody tried to turn the moment into proof. That was why Riley stayed. He stood there for nearly a minute, then backed away and returned to the kitchen. Noah blinked fast, but he did not cry. Hannah put a hand between his shoulders, and Miles saw the boy lean into it without taking his eyes off the doorway. The third visit happened on a clearer day, with the yard freshly cut and the smell of grass rising warmly from the ground. June came over with a quilt square in her lap and settled into the old metal chair beside the porch, pretending to work while watching everything. Miles stood near the kitchen door with his hands in his pockets, practicing the hardest lesson June had given him. Let the quiet do its work. Noah brought a thin paperback from school. He sat in the same place as before, put the rope toy beside his shoe, and opened the book to the middle. His voice wavered on the first sentence. then steadied as he read about a boy building a treehouse in summer. Riley listened from inside. At first, only his head appeared around the kitchen doorway. Then, one paw. Then both front paws placed carefully on the threshold as if he were testing whether the world would change too quickly beneath him. Noah kept reading, his eyes on the page, though Miles could see the boy's hands tighten around the book. Riley stepped onto the porch. He went first to the rope toy, sniffed it, and picked it up with the solemn care of someone carrying back a small piece of weathered history. Then he moved a few steps closer to Noah, close enough for the boy to see the dark thumbprint of fur between his eyes, close enough for Hannah's hand to cover her mouth. Still not close enough to touch. Noah smiled without reaching. That small mercy held Riley in place longer than any call could have. Afterward, things did not become perfect, because real healing rarely arrives with a clean ending and a bright ribbon tied around it. Hannah still lived in an apartment where Riley could not stay, and Noah still had to learn how to love a puppy who no longer slept at the foot of his bed. Miles still overmeasured food, reread vet notes, and occasionally looked at Riley as if the puppy might explain why he had chosen the laundry basket over the bed Miles had bought. June kept reminding him that puppies did not read schedules taped to refrigerators. Over time, the visits became part of the house's rhythm. Hannah brought a soft brush one week and sat on the porch while Riley sniffed it without fear. Noah read from different books, sometimes stumbling over words, sometimes laughing when Riley tried to nose the pages. His father drove him most times, waiting in the car or exchanging a few civil words at the gate, the quiet labor of adults trying to keep a child's heart from becoming the place where all their pain landed. Miles watched and learned. The old collar hung on a small hook near the back door beside Riley's new leash. It was not hidden away like evidence, and it was not placed where every visitor had to speak of it. It simply belonged there, worn leather beside new nylon, memory beside morning walks. Riley kept the name. When Hannah said it, he listened. When Noah said it, he stayed a little longer. When Miles said it at night, near the kitchen light and June's patched blanket, Riley lifted his head as if the sound had finally found a safe place to live. The past had not been erased to make room for the future. It had been given a place beside it. In the months that followed, Riley no longer stepped back every time Hannah and Noah came through the gate, though the story never needed a perfect reunion to become whole. Hannah learned to love without holding on too tightly. Noah learned that patience could be a kind of promise. June found herself needed in a house that had once been too quiet, and Miles learned that care was not an order given to pain. It was a place kept open. Riley's name no longer pulled him back only to the day he was lost. It became the sound that led him home again. Some stories do not end with a big reunion or a perfect answer. Sometimes they end with a porch step, an old rope toy, a boy keeping his hand still, and a puppy deciding in his own time that it is safe to come a little closer. Riley's story is fictional, but the ache inside it is real for many people who have loved something, lost it, and had to learn a different way of holding on. There is something quietly true about the way Miles kept the old collar beside the new leash. He did not erase what came before. He made room for it. Maybe that is how healing often works in ordinary life too. Not all at once, not with perfect words, but through small mercies, patient visits, clean blankets, soft voices, and the kind of grace that sometimes shows up in a kitchen light or a name spoken gently. If this story brought back a memory of someone you loved, a pet you still miss, or a small kindness that helped you through a hard season, I would love to read your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy grounded human stories like this, please like and subscribe. I think I will remember Riley most by that old collar hanging beside the new leash, as if yesterday and tomorrow had finally learned to share the same wall.